Thanks so much. Good afternoon or good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from the world. Tim and I are going to share with you a project that we worked on about a year ago, and I want to take you through what really has changed within the way that we look at jobs to be done and how we can better achieve that given AI. So I'm going to start with just giving you a little bit of background about myself as well as the way that we've approached jobs to be done at Clorox. I've been with Clorox Company about 12 years, and during that time have worked on shopper insights, brand insights, user insights, and have worked with both large brands and small brands. And a few years ago, we purchased a company, and one of the brands that they had was a brand called NeoCell. It's a smaller brand, smaller household penetration than a lot of the Clorox brands are, but still one that we needed to better understand the category. And the category they compete in is collagen. And so the way that we look at to understand how is it that consumers use this product and how can we best innovate behind it is by a four-pronged approach. So in the job structure, as many people use the jobs to be done structure, it has little nuances. So just to give you background for us, the way that we think about it is first thinking about job specs. So what is it that consumers are trying to get done, not just functionally, but also looking at emotionally and socially. We also then want to understand the job steps and what steps the consumers are taking to get this job done. Thirdly, we look at desired outcomes. What are those desired outcomes for each of those job steps? And most importantly, we really want to understand where is their tension? What's that struggle? Where are they dissatisfied or where are they making trade-offs? Because this is really the spot that we want to be able to solve for her with our new innovation and have a better solution for her in solving that job. And then lastly, what I'd say is within the substitute mapping. Again, we want to understand what she's currently using so that we can see, could we be a substitute for this? What can we give her to be a better solution for this job, but then even more broadly, where else might we be able to play? So as I said, this is a little bit to tell you what we used to do, but then now how we're approaching our jobs framework. So I said, then it was something that we had a qualitative approach because you really need to hear from the consumers. What does their jobs look like? What are they using these products for? What are those, as I talked about, what are those struggles they're having? You need to hear it from the consumer's voice. And so with that, we would do qualitative, tended to be smaller, limited number of interviews, observations, maybe 10 or 15 people, because you really want to get that deep richness of understanding of language. It really didn't allow us to have that broad relevance to understand, well, how many people feel like this across the U.S. or across the world. And it also was very time intensive because, again, as I say, you're really trying to understand this rich language, this rich understanding from each consumer. So now with this new version that we start looking at jobs and partnering with Questor for this new approach, not only are they able to give us that rich understanding, but their internal approach and the style that they use and that we used for this project really helps us in understanding that job to be done, but also understanding it at a much bigger scale, which was the key piece that we wanted and needed as we look to better improve the research that we were doing with consumers to understand all of those different components of jobs. So as I mentioned, that having that one-on-one conversation is key. You really want to understand what the consumer is doing, how they're feeling, so you can get, as I mentioned, not only the functional, but also that emotional and even social jobs that are being done. And so as we're doing that, with this one-on-one online conversation and leveraging Questor's AI-driven approach and their moderator that's an AI-backed moderator, it allows us to do this not just with the 10 or 15 people that we were doing before, but instead with hundreds of people. So it's not only qualitative, but it's now quantitative as well. They're able to do the probing that is key to understand why someone feels which way, or to tell us a little more about what they're saying when they do a certain thing. And so this AI moderator really does a great job of emulating a human moderator. In fact, I had some business partners that during the testing phase, went in and tried to, quote unquote, stump or break the moderator, and we're very impressed with how much it really did seem like a human conversation. And as far as consumers, they really are used to, in this day and age, and even more so now in the last few weeks across the globe, but they're used to interacting online with chat-type functionality. So having that type of conversation within the AI moderator really was something that was seamless to consumers as well. So as I mentioned, not only did this allow us to have more people, but to really, like I say, probe and understand that language and draw out those pieces to understand each of the jobs and to really understand with that confidence that this is a job that we're not just talking to 10 or 15 people, but that is something that is important to a large percentage of the population. There also, as I mentioned, not only is it about being AI-driven, but Questor has this wonderful linguistic analysis that they can do to really understand and uncover some of those nuances and the depth of that rich conversation I mentioned that we really looked for as we were doing qualitative work before, and now could get with this quali-quant approach. So again, as I looked at that, not only was I getting more of all of that, but because when you think about the cost per interview, it was significantly less cost than our traditional methods. So just to give you a little bit of background, before I turn it over to Tim to explain what we did, from our objectives, what we were trying to understand was who was doing this hiring of our collagen-based or beauty supplement as we look beyond just collagen. And we wanted to understand all of the forms. So not just necessarily supplements in the pill form or other form that we might have, but really broadly, what were they doing in that beauty supplement space? And what other categories, like I said, beyond just collagen? We also want to understand the what. So the jobs that people were hiring collagen for, as well as those other beauty supplement products, did that differ between product to product? And also, how often were they doing these jobs? Was this something that they did on a daily basis, or was it only special occasions? What dissatisfiers did they have with the current products they were hiring? Because as I mentioned before, that's really a key piece to understand where's that tension, what's that struggle for where they aren't satisfied, so you can provide the innovation that is going to satisfy them. And then lastly, we talked about which products the consumers were hiring. So we could understand, did more people tend to use a certain type of product? Were there certain flavors that worked? What was the current products and those dissatisfiers they had with it? So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Tim and let him introduce himself and take us through the next several slides.
Excellent. Thank you, Caroline. Questor, we're an insights and strategies company that just happens to have built a very innovative technology to collect data. In our phase 1 of our jobs to be done framework, we interview 200 or more consumers via mobile or online. The great thing about the mobile interviews is that we are still able to capture videos of respondents, and or we can capture pictures and images that they have in their home or whether they're out and about. So in 2005, our founder had this dream of being able to look at qualitative data with the same confidence as quantitative data. We started developing the industry's only moderator at the time with that goal in mind. In 2006, we launched our first version. Didn't have artificial intelligence in it at that point in time, was mainly focused on just broad-based follow-up probing questions. Fast forward to 2011, we started to look at all of the data that we had collected and build AI into the software moderator. Now it can conduct the interviews in multiple different languages, and all interviews are conducted in a one-on-one fashion. So we wanted to give you an overview very quickly through a video of how the AI works so that it can bring it to life on what we're talking about and what the consumer experience.
Let's deep dive into how the artificial intelligence works. Respondents engage in what appears to be a traditional online or mobile survey. But as they type in their answers to open-ended questions, the software is analyzing every word. It processes multiple layers of intelligence in real time to determine unique, open-ended, follow-up probing questions. These probes are grounded in uncovering further definition, elaboration, implication, and rationale. Questor's artificial intelligence works off 3 tiers of intelligence. Prior to interviewing, Questor moderators pre-program targeted probes, language specific to your project or hypotheses, that trigger a specific follow-up question. Targeted probes help respondents take their ideas to a deeper level. One example of leveraging this intelligence would be to dive deep into drivers and barriers of ideas, concepts, and claims based on the key stimulus language. The second layer of intelligence involves redirect probes to push respondents to think beyond the easy answers. An example of this intelligence in action is our path to purchase, where we acknowledge the consumer's ideas, but push them to think beyond the surface level. The third layer of intelligence is natural language probing. Unique ideas on a per-respondent level are identified through this most sophisticated and widely used tier. The artificial intelligence probes the response by categorizing each word based on nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and then applies an algorithm that understands the proximity of each word against one another. For example, when used within unmet needs, jobs to be done, and innovation research, the unique idea is identified and pulled into the follow-up probing questions to uncover deeper context. Our goal with every project is...
Questor designs a questionnaire much like any other research partner. The only difference is that once that questionnaire is developed, we drop it into the artificial intelligence platform. From there, once the data is collected, our team of linguistic analysts, very important to note, these are human beings. We have not created artificial intelligence to replace our very talented individuals, and we don't foresee us doing that anytime soon. And part of that is because they're all trained linguistic analysts that can look at language in a very different and unique way to pull out nuances. So we asked them, we look at the stories, and we take the jobs to be done training that we've had to very quickly identify through all of these rich stories the jobs that exist. And there are macro jobs, there are micro jobs, but we're going through each transcript one by one and analyzing the content to develop a job landscape. And I'll hand it back over to Caroline.
Thanks, Tim. So these next several slides, I'll take you through some of what the outputs are from this project, and certainly not any of the proprietary information, but just more what you can expect as you're getting this to see the rich sources of information that you can understand about this new method of getting to jobs to be done. So as before, not only does it identify need states, but then because of the numbers of consumers that you're talking to, you can get to a lower level of what these need states are. So, you know, again, as I talked about the landscape and how they break out, we work collaboratively with Questor to really look down and see, this is what we're looking like, does that sound like something? And then we can roll them back up into a more meaningful, perhaps need state as we then describe them in these larger systems by looking down to the smallest micro job and then rolling up to see those bigger impacts across the jobs to be done. And then also one of the things, again, as I keep talking about this richness of information, it's really important that we have almost what you would think of as a segmentation outline to really understand who this consumer is and where their story leads them. You know, who she is, what's the job she's doing, again, as I mentioned before, not just functionally, but also socially and emotionally. And then even more importantly is getting it in their own words. So as I said, really talking to her and being able to hear how she talks about things, as opposed to the way that we as researchers might talk about things. And then that trigger, that tension that I spoke to before, really understanding what triggers that need. Where was that tension she currently has that lets us know, oh, this is where she's going to need a product and look for a product to solve that job. So having those details really helps us to better understand as we are looking to develop, again, this innovation pipeline to solve all of these jobs. We also, as I mentioned, have the deeper dive of not only the different jobs, but what her desired outcomes was. Why is she taking this product? What does she want it to do for her? What currently is being hired? As I mentioned before, want to understand what's currently working and not working for her. Also, as we talk about each of these kind of need state, this larger need state, there's not going to only be one job, whether it's functional, emotional, social, that goes across all. So really having all of those additional jobs in specs and understanding those different nuances really gave us that, rich content that we needed through the AI engagement. So it will uncover not just, as I mentioned, those functional, but even more of those emotional and social because of the probing the AI moderator was able to do. And then, as Tim spoke to, the talented linguistic teams that were able to get those slight nuances between those places that different consumers may use. And then this is the second thing. So that was basically our first phase that we did to, like I say, really wanted to try and identify those jobs. But then we went back for a second phase so that we could size that prize and understand, okay, now that we know what are these different jobs, what are the ones that are going to be the most relevant for us, the ones that have the most upside possibilities, the potential, so that we can look at the total marketplace and size those jobs. And as I mentioned, in our first phase, we had hundreds of people that did that first phase, but then we took this in the second phase to get an even larger demographic representation and really understand what are those jobs. So we profile those jobs to get those demographics to say, is this one more male, female? Is this one more certain parts of the country? Perhaps if there's a retailer we want to partner with, that's going to be the job that we're going to lean into because we know that's the part of the country where this job is most often seen. Other things like that really help in getting to those richer job profiles to understand who she is, where she's shopping, what different types of things, if she likes a certain form, if there are, as I mentioned, the retailers that she's shopping at. All of that type of information can really help to gather more and more information so that when we're developing our products, and I keep talking about developing products, but like I said, there are many more things we can even do with this. Once we've developed the product, this again helps us to understand what type of program might we want to design for the in-store execution of this because we have these rich insights. And so within this quant piece, we're able to get, again, more of those key demographics and metrics to be able to see what we might want to do as we go forward within these different jobs. We also were able to get job steps and, again, that rich detail to understand not just the what and what are the steps that she's taking, but a lot of that why. And that, again, is key as we're understanding. And certainly, even as I mentioned, it's not just about innovation. I mentioned about selling into different stores and retailers. It can be about the programs that we're designing there. But understanding this why can also help us in developing our marketing techniques. So we had different tactics that we might use based on why she's using a certain form, why she's using a certain brand. All of those things help us to better understand what she's doing, why she's doing it, so that we can develop products, programs that really fit this job need. And then, as I mentioned with the job demos, we then were able to look across all of the jobs and really understand, hey, if we want to go after the millennial target, as so many of our companies do want to, what are those jobs that pertain more to that consumer than perhaps the Gen X consumer? What are the jobs that appeal more to men than to women? We have, while this project, again, was for our collagen brand in NeoCell, we do have a portfolio of supplement brands. So might we understand from these jobs if one of our other product lines even were a better fit based on those demographic profiles? Were there more things that we could do by learning who these consumers are that were appealed on each of these jobs? So as I said, I identified several macro jobs, and then we were able to do each of these profiles for each of those macro jobs to really lean into one or the other. And then, as I say, we talked about originally we were trying to do this to identify our innovation pillars and where we wanted to lean into innovation. But as I've mentioned, we continue to use this. We have used, as I said, this study we did about a year ago. Not only did it help us to identify those pillars, but it's helped us in the shopperscape to understand how might we want to organize the shelf so that as we look at, it's not just all about collagen, it's these different jobs and different needs that collagen is fitting. It might even be that it makes sense to go to different parts of the store based on those different needs. Having this information has helped us to then use this to talk to the retailers and understand their shoppers so that we can do that. And then also, as I mentioned, it helps us within the marketing team so they can understand what are those pieces as they're trying to optimize their product and the portfolio as we look to perhaps different merchandising events or different online tactics. What are those things you really want to call out as these different products will fit better for different jobs? So as I mentioned, one of the things was about innovation, but this really has in the last year been used for so much broader than that. So in closing, I just wanted to say, for me personally, having been in this industry for 20 some odd years, having these new approaches like AI really can help me to understand and uncover some of the elements that have been in approaches that we've been using for years and years in a new way that allows, again, especially in times like these when we might not even be able to go into people's homes, but really still get that rich depth of understanding of the consumers, their needs, and their wants. It's the key to understanding and meeting those objectives as we as businesses continue to move forward in these new times. So with that, I'll thank you very much and open it up for questions.
Yeah, we had some really good questions come in. This first one I like is very provocative and thought-provoking. So do you foresee AI-driven moderators replacing human moderators as the best practice for qualitative research in the future? I might take a stab at this, Caroline, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. For me personally, I think the answer is no. I don't believe that AI-driven moderators will outright replace human moderators. Even at Questor, we look at all of our projects and determine, is it a fit? Is the AI moderator a fit for this specific project? Or are there elements where we actually need to be doing this via a human? Questor's staff is trained moderators as well, and we still do a decent amount of traditional one-on-one in-person or ethnographies. It really just depends upon the research objective. It depends upon the category and ultimately what you're trying to solve for. There are elements where being able to observe a consumer or a person is vitally important that you're just not going to be able to capture with the AI, even with video. And having them take a video of themselves doing something, there's certain things that it may or may not work for. But we have been able to successfully identify a number of different frameworks, exploratory projects, jobs to be done is one, segmentation, etc. And those are all things where we absolutely can apply the AI moderator. But Caroline, love to hear your thoughts. Do you think that AI moderators are going to replace human moderators as the best practice for qualitative?
I agree with you, Tim. No, I don't think it will. I think, to your point, it really is about understanding what your objectives are and what an AI moderator can bring to the table versus a live human can bring to the table. And certainly there'll be times when one makes sense more than the other. I think there's certainly, it has come a long way in the last 5-10 years even. So I think they're probably being used more than I thought they were had you asked me this question 10 years ago. But I really can't see it entirely replacing. It's really is going to be more about understanding when is it that you need the different places. But as I mentioned several times, for me, even though we did this a year ago, it does give me confidence that if we are now going to be more restricted, that we have this as an option as we look going forward if we aren't able to go into people's homes for the time being.
And we have another question. Does the AI system use humor? It really just depends upon the category. I wouldn't say that that's an out-of-the-box solution, although we can configure it to include humor in the types of questions that we're asking in the follow-up. But again, not a default setting. There's another question of what type of research would you advise a startup to engage in when starting with no funds? I think that there's a lot of great content out there personally. We do a ton of desk research. There's so many great writers, and there's webinars like this one and other great sources of content to really pull from. And there are ways to do research on your own in more of a DIY fashion, where you can observe consumers at a very low cost. You can talk to them. There's a number of different platforms that are available.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. I think, again, in the last 25 years, I've seen quite a bit of change as far as the cost going down and the time going down. So there are a lot of things that aren't necessarily no cost, but they certainly are much lower cost. And we have the benefit, again, and a lot of times you can partner with other brands that might be interested. It's not competing, but if you're looking for something that's a much higher level understanding about consumers, you might all be, for example, myself, that we're in the health space. So there could be other brands that aren't in the supplement space, but still are going to be interested in that wellness arena. So could we partner with them and to divide the cost? And then as Tim mentioned, I think there's a lot with a no cost, and it kind of goes back to when being in graduate school, what are the types of things that, I all the time will just be in stores and, act like you're just a curious person. Like, oh, I'm looking for a tomato sauce too. What made you pick up that one? Oh, really? Tell me more about that. How do you make that decision? And you just seem like you're a either creepy, but certainly very curious person, but not necessarily a researcher. So there are ways to do that. I would say, certainly with friends and family. And in using friends and family, though, I would ask them to help broaden your audience. So if they can refer you to 5 friends or 10 friends, the more that you can broaden that circle so you aren't just hearing from people that all have similar mindsets and thoughts and needs and geographic locations and all of that, the better that will help you as well.
That's a great answer. There's a number of questions around the AI moderator, and I'll maybe kind of finalize with that. So we can conduct, the AI can conduct interviews in multiple different languages. We've Spanish, Portuguese, German, French, Italian, and Chinese. The participants do not know that they're actually talking to an AI moderator. It's all chat-based, but with the emergence of people using their mobile devices, they can indeed speak into the phone and do talk to text. And the follow-up questions are always presented back to them in a text format. And then the final point that I'll make is that we do conduct large-scale qualitative, but we also hundreds, if not thousands, of people. But we also find a lot of our business is taking quantitative research and finding ways to integrate many qualitative conversations throughout the overall questionnaire, much like we did in the phase 2. So in the interest of time, on behalf of Caroline and myself, we want to thank everyone for attending today, for the great questions and your undivided attention.